Let me cast your mind back to 2012. It was the final year in the Mayan calendar, which many people believed to be the end times. Others, however, lived their lives as normal. Capcom, the Japanese game publisher and developer, decided to hedge many of their bets on various games and software this year. Some were successes, such as Dragon's Dogma, Resident Evil Revelations, Revelations, and the fan-created but Capcom published Street Fighter Cross Mega Man. Other releases were not so successful, such as the disastrous Steel Battalion Heavy Armor, the absolutely dreadful Resident Evil 6, and the profoundly disappointing Street Fighter Cross Tekken. But one game came out in this year, one that was praised for but a brief moment, and was a victim in Capcom being more than a little greedy, which ended with the company shooting the game in the foot before it even got to do their first lap around the bases. That game is Asura's Wrath. Asura's Wrath is a game that's honestly quite like no other and has never been imitated since. A 3D brawler that had very simple controls but was very satisfying in its gameplay loop. What made the game more unique than most is the fact that many actions performed outside of gameplay and within cutscenes were done with QuickTime events, yet they weren't intrusive and didn't interrupt the flow of gameplay. In fact, they would be weaved into the narrative as a way to literally make a character stop talking with a punch to the face. But some of you might be wondering, why would the main character in this game I've never heard of punch someone in the face whilst in the middle of talking? In which case, time to discuss exactly what Asura's Wrath is, who Asura is, and why the game involves his wrath so much. In Asura's Wrath, you play as the titular Asura, a demigod and one of the 8 guardian generals who control an army of mechanical soldiers that take more than a little inspiration from Hinduism and Buddhism in terms of design. Asura, along with his fellow guardian generals Olga, Sergei, Kalro, Wyzen, Yasha, August, and Deus, are mechanical in nature and serve the population of Gaia as well as their emperor. After momentarily defeating a large monster residing within the planet known as the Goma Vlitra, Asura decides to visit his wife Durga and their daughter Mithra. The celebration is short-lived as the Emperor decides to summon Asura to visit him and is unfortunately dead before he gets there, murdered by someone, with Asura acting as the unknowing fall guy and framed for the murdered Emperor. Wanting answers, Asura runs to tell the one person he trusts more than anyone, his wife. Unfortunately, she's been murdered as well. Wanting to find his daughter who had gone missing, he discovers that she's been kidnapped by Deus and is being held captive for her ability to strengthen people through the power of mantra, a life force that gives Gaia's inhabitants life. Not wanting his daughter to be subjected to the constant torture just to keep the people of Gaia safe, Asura attempts to free her, only to be met with death. But his soul still burns for vengeance and justice. Having fallen into the world of dead souls known as Naraka, he holds onto his anger and forces himself back up into the world of the living, alive once more and now filled with pure, white-hot, intense rage. The only thing that can quell his fury is revenge for the betrayal by his so-called comrades and the security of his daughter. To those who have never played this game or paid any attention to it when it was released, they might be thinking one of two things. Either, man, this sounds a lot like Final Fantasy, what with the various terms and such. Or the more common, God's revenge? A man being angry? This sounds a whole lot like God of War back before the 2018 release. And yeah, you wouldn't be completely incorrect with the fact that this story seems a little derivative at first, but what makes it different is just how far it goes with the story and various concepts. For starters, the 8 Guardian Generals all have special mantra affinities that represents one of 8 flaws within human emotions, those being lust, pride, violence, sloth, vanity, greed, melancholy, and obviously wrath. As seen with the mechanical soldiers and various terms being thrown around, there's a heavy influence of Hinduism and Buddhism mythologies, mostly in aesthetics. Another thing worth mentioning is the fact that the story takes place over thousands and thousands of years due to the nature of Asura climbing out of Naraka taking so long. And one last thing that makes this a little more special than just a normal God of War clone is the fact that this game is incredibly anime. It's got yelling, powering up, power boosts that seem like they're out of nowhere, and even a little Hot Springs episode. It's even got DLC episodes that feature anime-esque animation. They're not too worth it for the gameplay, as you can just put the controller down for the entire time. But there's more DLC that is very worth it. Crossover episodes with Street Fighter where you can fight against Ryu and Akuma, both on their turf and on your turf. It's such a bizarre crossover that also makes sense with the nebulous and unclear Street Fighter timeline. This game seems to be so bursting at the seams with content. What could go wrong? Within the following months of release for Asura's Wrath, it was surrounded by controversy due to one specific DLC pack labeled Episode Pack Part 4. For those uninitiated, Asura's Wrath was supposed to have a completely self-contained story with an actual ending. If you had received enough S ranks in enough episodes, you unlocked a secret extra scene in the final episode, which many people believed to be a teaser for the next game. What they didn't expect was Capcom selling the entire final chapter of the game as DLC, thus selling the real ending of a game as DLC. This controversy came at about the same time as Street Fighter Cross Tekken's on-disc DLC controversy, which busted the door wide open on different games that followed a similar DLC practice. Due to the incredibly unfortunate timing, many people believed that the true ending DLC was also on disc. Even when people realized it wasn't on disc, the true ending was attacked by Detract due to it being the real ending to a self-contained story being sold for money, meaning that if you didn't buy it, you wouldn't be getting the entire story. The part that makes this all the more heartbreaking for a new series like Asura's Wrath is the fact that it's absolutely the best part of the game. It has real, genuine character depth. It ends on a climactic and epic, yet satisfying, conclusive high note. And no one cared. It was too late. The only people who took notice were people like me, who were fans of the game already. No one got to know just how good the story of Asura's Wrath could be, just how much farther it could escalate. The game faded into obscurity, now only being mentioned as a cautionary tale about how not to do DLC. The worst part is the fact that this DLC is worth every cent and is even better than even the Street Fighter crossover, but no one will know now. Asura's Wrath is a tragedy. Its story had a beginning, an end. Its nebulous time frame and interesting concept allows it to cross over with other Capcom franchises, and it escalates in scale seen so very rarely in other video games. But Capcom became too greedy. They milked the cash cow so hard it ripped the udders off and the cow bled to death. Asura's Wrath was supposed to be a brand new IP that people could fondly reminisce on for years, but Capcom shot it in the foot before the race even began. Should the ending have been DLC? Honestly, I still believe they couldn't even fit the final chapter on the disc, with how much space the normal game more than likely took up. So maybe they had to resort to DLC. Should the ending have been sold? Absolutely not. A patch or even free DLC would have been more than enough. But it's far too late. Asura's Wrath will fade into obscurity, being spoken only by gaming historians about major mistakes made by a company who was once known as Cap God for their impeccable releases. I hope that this video at least informs some of you as to why Asura's Wrath failed, as well as why it shouldn't have. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough for me, and that's what hurts the most about the situation. I can only hope other people feel the same way. This has been Rising Superstar, and I love you.